There comes a moment in every empath's journey when the universe delivers what I can only call a final warning. It arrives not as divine punishment, but as merciful intervention, a last opportunity to step back from the precipice of self-annihilation disguised as service. If you have found your way to these words, if something within you has stirred with recognition at the phrase "giving too much," then know this: you stand at that precipice now, and what I am about to share may be the rope that pulls you back from the edge. Jung spoke of the wounded healer archetype with both reverence and caution, for he understood what modern spirituality often glosses over in its rush toward feel-good platitudes. The healer who has not faced their own shadow, who has not descended into the underworld of their own psyche, becomes not a conduit of healing, but a magnet for the very wounds they seek to mend in others. They become what I have witnessed in countless souls who have crossed my threshold, the compulsive giver, the one who mistakes their own emptiness for enlightenment, their own hunger for holiness. I remember a dream shared by a woman whose empathy had become her prison. She stood in a vast desert, her body a well from which an endless line of people drew water. She watched herself grow smaller with each person who drank, yet she could not stop them, could not close the well, could not speak the word no. When she woke, she wept not from sadness but from recognition. For 20 years she had been that well, drawing from reserves that had long since run dry, convinced that her value lay in her capacity to be consumed. This is the sacred wound of the empath who gives too much. They have confused their gift with their identity, their sensitivity with their sacrifice. They have made themselves indispensable to others as a way of feeling essential to themselves. But the unconscious, that ancient keeper of truth, does not reward such false martyrdom. Instead, it sends symptoms: exhaustion that sleep cannot cure, relationships that drain rather than nourish, a growing sense of resentment that contradicts their spiritual self-image, and most tellingly, a creeping emptiness where their authentic self once resided. The final warning comes when these symptoms can no longer be ignored, when the empath realizes they have become a ghost haunting their own life. They have given so much of themselves away that they no longer know what remains. They look in the mirror and see not their own face, but the reflection of everyone else's needs, everyone else's pain, everyone else's unfinished business. They have become what Jung called a provisional existence, living not their own life, but a pale imitation of what they believe others need them to be. But here is what the spiritual marketplace will not tell you. This compulsive giving is not love, it is not service, it is not enlightenment. It is possession by an archetype that has gone unconscious, a pattern that has seized control of the personality and begun to feed on it. The archetype of the eternal mother, the savior, the martyr, has taken residence in the psyche and convinced the ego that its demands are divine calling. The empath believes they are being called to serve, but they are actually being called to surrender their own soul on the altar of others' comfort. This possession manifests in predictable ways: the inability to say no without crushing guilt, the compulsive need to fix others' problems before addressing their own, the strange comfort found in crisis and chaos, the addiction to being needed that masquerades as love. These are not character flaws, they are symptoms of a psyche that has lost its center, a soul that has forgotten its own name in the chorus of others' demands. The final warning is this: continue down this path and you will disappear entirely, not physically but spiritually, emotionally, authentically. You will become a hollow vessel, beautifully decorated on the outside but empty within, serving everyone and belonging to no one, least of all yourself. What lies beneath the compulsive giving of the unconscious empath is perhaps the most difficult truth they will ever face. Their generosity is not pure. It is contaminated by shadow motives so subtle, so cleverly disguised as virtue, that even the most self-aware among them struggle to recognize the deception. Jung warned us that the shadow is not what we hate about ourselves, but what we refuse to see. And for the empath who gives too much, the shadow wears the mask of the savior. I have sat across from countless souls who came to me bearing the weight of their own sanctity, convinced of their noble calling to heal the world. Yet as we descended together into the depths of their unconscious motivations, what emerged was not the pure spring of compassion they believed themselves to be, but a murky well of unmet needs, unhealed wounds, and unconscious bargains struck in the darkness of childhood. Their giving, they discovered, was not selfless, but profoundly selfish, driven not by love, but by a desperate hunger to be loved, to be needed, to matter in a world that had once made them feel invisible. The savior complex is perhaps the most seductive of all psychological possessions, because it allows us to feel superior while appearing humble, to control others while seeming to serve them, to avoid our own pain while drowning in everyone else's. The empath possessed by this complex becomes addicted to being needed, for in that need they find the only proof of their worth they have ever known. They create dependencies where none should exist. They rush to rescue those who never asked to be saved, and they mistake the grateful attachment of others for genuine love. But the unconscious keeps meticulous records of all transactions, and it knows when the books do not balance. The empath who gives from ego rather than essence begins to feel the weight of invisible debts. They give and give, yet somehow they never receive what they truly hunger for. They save and save, yet the world seems more broken than before. They pour themselves out like wine, yet they remain empty, bitter, resentful of the very people they claim to serve. This is because their giving has become a form of spiritual materialism, an investment in an identity that requires constant maintenance. They are not giving freely. They are purchasing a sense of self through the currency of others' gratitude. They are not healing. They are avoiding the terrifying confrontation with their own wounds by staying busy with everyone else's. They are not serving. They are performing, hoping that if they play the role of the good one, the helpful one, the indispensable one long enough, they will finally receive the love they were denied as children. The shadow savior operates from a fundamental lie, that they are somehow responsible for others' happiness, others' healing, others' journey. This grandiose delusion masks a profound sense of powerlessness over their own life. Unable to fix themselves, they attempt to fix the world. Unable to love themselves, they love others with suffocating intensity. Unable to face their own darkness, they become obsessed with bringing light to others, not realizing that their light has become a spotlight, exposing everyone's wounds while keeping their own hidden in the shadows. Jung spoke of enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite when taken to extremes. The compulsive giver, driven by their savior complex, inevitably becomes the very thing they most fear, a burden. Their constant giving becomes an obligation for others to receive. Their help becomes interference. Their love becomes possession. They create the very rejection they sought to avoid through their endless service. And in that rejection, they find the proof they always secretly believed, that they are indeed unworthy of genuine love. The final warning grows louder. Your giving has become taking, your healing has become harming, your service has become slavery. The shadow behind your savior mask is demanding recognition, and until you turn to face it, you will continue to wound in the name of healing, to imprison in the name of love. To understand why the empath gives beyond all reason, beyond all capacity, beyond all wisdom, we must look beyond the personal psyche into the ancestral depths where patterns are born and reborn across generations. Jung understood that we do not simply inherit our ancestors' eyes or their bone structure. We inherit their unfinished psychological business, their unlived lives, their unhealed wounds. For many empaths, the compulsion to give everything of themselves is not their own creation, but an ancestral imperative passed down through bloodlines like a sacred curse. I have traced this pattern through the family histories of those who came to me drowning in their own generosity. There is often a grandmother who sacrificed herself for everyone else's survival, a great-grandfather who worked himself to death for the family's welfare, a lineage of women who were taught that their value existed only in service to others. These ancestors, well-meaning though they were, created psychic templates that continue to operate in their descendants long after the original circumstances that necessitated such sacrifice have passed. The ancestral empath carries within their bones the memory of times when survival truly did depend on being useful, on being needed, on never saying no. Perhaps their forebears lived through wars where caring for others meant the difference between life and death, or survived poverty where their worth was measured only by their contribution to the family's survival. These survival strategies, once adaptive, become maladaptive when inherited by descendants living in entirely different circumstances. Yet the unconscious does not distinguish between past and present danger. It continues to operate as if the family's survival still depends on endless giving. This ancestral programming manifests in what I call the inherited martyr syndrome. The modern empath finds themselves unable to rest while others suffer, unable to say no when asked for help, unable to prioritize their own needs without crushing guilt. They mistake these compulsions for spiritual calling, not recognizing them as ancestral ghosts whispering instructions from beyond the grave. They are living not their own life, but the unlived portions of their ancestors' lives, completing sacrifices that were never theirs to make. The dreams of these individuals often reveal the ancestral dimension of their compulsion. They dream of ancient women gathering herbs in moonlight, of men carrying impossible burdens up endless mountains, of hands reaching from the earth, pulling them downward into graves that smell of lavender and regret. These are not metaphorical dreams, but literal communications from the ancestral unconscious, showing them the source of their compulsive service and warning them of where it leads. But here is what makes this ancestral pattern particularly insidious. It is often defended as virtue. The family system rewards the empath for carrying the ancestral burden, praising them as the good one, the caring one, the one who can always be counted on. They become the family's emotional regulator, the one who smooths over conflicts, absorbs tensions, and maintains the illusion of harmony. In this role, they feel important, needed, even holy, never recognizing that they have become a psychological slave to patterns that should have died with their ancestors. The ancestral chains are not broken by understanding them intellectually. They are broken by conscious rebellion against them. The empath must be willing to disappoint their family system, to be seen as selfish, to allow others to carry their own emotional weight. They must be willing to let the ancestral dead bury their own dead, rather than carrying their unfinished business into yet another generation. This requires what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold the tension between ancestral loyalty and individual authenticity until a new way emerges. The empath must honor their ancestors' sacrifice while refusing to repeat it, must acknowledge the gift of their sensitivity while setting boundaries around it, must love their family while choosing to live their own life rather than the ghost of their ancestors' unlived dreams. Now we arrive at the most paradoxical truth in the empath's journey. To serve others authentically, you must first learn the art of sacred selfishness. This is not the crude selfishness of the narcissist who takes without giving, but the refined selfishness of the individuated soul who understands that you cannot pour from an empty cup, cannot give what you do not possess, cannot love others more than you love yourself without that love becoming possession, control, and ultimately harm. Sacred selfishness begins with the radical recognition that you are not responsible for others' emotional states, others' healing, others' happiness, or others' spiritual evolution. This recognition cuts like a sword through the web of codependent relationships the unconscious empath has woven around themselves. It demands that you stop being the emotional regulator for your family, the perpetual rescuer in your friendships, the unpaid therapist in your romantic relationships. It asks you to commit what feels like the ultimate betrayal, letting others feel their own feelings, carry their own burdens, and learn their own lessons. I have watched empaths recoil from this teaching as if I had asked them to commit murder. Their entire identity has been built around being needed, being helpful, being indispensable. To step back from this role feels like psychological death, and in many ways, it is. The false self that has masqueraded as virtue must die for the authentic self to be born. This death is not comfortable. It is not pretty. It is not accompanied by spiritual fanfare. It is often accompanied by guilt, by the accusations of others who have grown dependent on their sacrifice, by the terrifying silence that comes when you stop filling every void with your presence. But in this death, something miraculous begins to happen. The empath discovers that when they stop trying to manage everyone else's inner world, they finally have energy to explore their own. When they stop absorbing others' pain, they can finally feel their own. When they stop being everything to everyone, they can finally discover who they are to themselves. This is the alchemy of sacred selfishness. It transmutes the lead of compulsive giving into the gold of conscious choice. The sacred, selfish empath learns to ask questions that would have horrified their former self. What do I need right now? What would serve my highest good? What would I choose if I didn't have to consider anyone else's feelings? These questions are not asked from a place of cruelty, but from a place of curious self-discovery. They are the questions of someone who is finally ready to meet themselves after years of hiding behind the mask of service to others. This inner work reveals something extraordinary. When the empath stops giving compulsively, they begin to give consciously. When they stop rescuing reflexively, they begin to help wisely. When they stop loving desperately, they begin to love freely. Their relationships transform from draining exchanges to nourishing connections because they are no longer offering themselves as a sacrifice, but as a gift freely given and just as freely withdrawn when it is not appreciated or reciprocated. The sacred selfish empath understands that saying no is not rejection, but discernment, that boundaries are not walls, but bridges, that self-care is not selfishness, but stewardship of the soul. They recognize that their sensitivity is not a curse to be hidden, but a gift to be treasured, not a bottomless well for others to drain, but a sacred spring to be protected and honored. They learn that the most loving thing they can do for others is to model what it looks like to live an authentic life, to show by example what it means to honor one's own needs while still caring deeply for others. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It requires the courage to disappoint others, to be misunderstood, to be labeled as selfish by those who benefited from your self-sacrifice. But it is the only path to authentic empathy, to genuine service, to love that heals rather than harms. We arrive now at the final threshold, the place where the empath who has died to their compulsions is reborn as something far more powerful. The sovereign empath, the one who feels deeply but stands firmly, who serves wisely but never sacrificially, who loves freely but never desperately. This is not the return to innocence, but the arrival at wisdom, not the restoration of the old self, but the birth of the authentic self that was always waiting beneath the layers of conditioning, trauma, and ancestral programming. The sovereign empath has learned the most crucial lesson of all, that their sensitivity is not a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be wielded consciously. They no longer apologize for their depth, no longer dim their light to make others comfortable, no longer shrink their presence to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain them. They understand that their empathy is not a bottomless well for others to draw from, but a sacred gift to be offered selectively, consciously, and only to those who can receive it without exploitation or expectation. This transformation is marked by a profound shift in how they move through the world. Where once they entered rooms scanning for pain to absorb, they now enter as a grounded presence that invites others to meet them at their level rather than dragging them down to the depths of unconscious suffering. They become what Jung called a container for others' emotions without becoming a sponge for them. They can witness pain without taking it on, can offer comfort without becoming responsible for others' healing, can love without losing themselves in the process. The dreams of the sovereign empath change dramatically. Gone are the nightmares of drowning in others' emotions, of being consumed by invisible forces, of losing themselves in the needs of others. Instead, they dream of standing at the edge of vast oceans, feeling the pull of the depths but choosing to remain on shore. They dream of mirrors that reflect not others' pain, but their own radiant wholeness. They dream of themselves as lighthouse keepers, offering light to those lost at sea without abandoning their post to rescue every drowning soul. But perhaps the most profound change is in their relationships. The sovereign empath no longer attracts the energy vampires, the emotional manipulators, the perpetual victims who once flocked to their unguarded generosity. Instead, they begin to magnetize others who match their level of consciousness, who can give as much as they receive, who appreciate their depth without exploiting their sensitivity. They discover that authentic connection is not built on neediness, but on wholeness meeting wholeness, not on one person's emptiness seeking to be filled by another's fullness, but on two complete beings choosing to share their completeness. This is the final warning transformed into final wisdom. The empath who learns to guard their gift becomes not less loving but more loving, not less giving but more discerning, not less empathetic but more conscious. They learn that the highest service they can offer the world is not their sacrifice but their sovereignty, not their depletion but their fullness, not their wounds but their healing. The sovereign empath stands as a testament to what is possible when sensitivity is married to strength, when empathy is guided by wisdom, when the heart is protected by healthy boundaries. They become living proof that you can feel deeply without drowning, can care profoundly without sacrificing, can love unconditionally without losing yourself. They show the world what it means to be both tender and fierce, both open and protected, both giving and receiving. If you have recognized yourself in these words, if you have felt the sting of truth in this final warning, then know that your journey towards sovereignty has already begun. The very fact that you can see the prison of your compulsive giving means you have already glimpsed the key to your freedom. The path ahead is not easy, but it is sacred, and it leads not to the death of your empathy, but to its resurrection in a form so pure, so powerful, so consciously wielded that it becomes not your burden, but your gift to the world. If this message has awakened something within you, if you recognize the patterns we've explored in your own life, then your transformation cannot wait another day. The unconscious empath lives in endless tomorrow, always promising themselves they'll set boundaries next time. They'll say no when it's easier. They'll prioritize themselves once everyone else is okay. But the sovereign empath knows that there is only now, only this moment to choose differently. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to continue this journey of conscious awakening. Share this video with another empath who needs to hear this truth, for in sharing wisdom, we multiply its power. And most importantly, begin today. Choose one boundary you've been afraid to set and set it. Choose one no you've been avoiding and speak it. Choose one moment today to ask yourself, what do I need, instead of, what does everyone else need from me? Your sensitivity is not your sentence, it's your superpower waiting to be claimed. But only you can claim it, and only now can you begin.